Good morning, Carl from Recording Studio Oxford. Just turning on the lights here a bit so you can see. I hope I look somewhat less terrifying on that one. Okay, now we come to our next story, namely The Bushy Bride. There was once upon a time a widower who had a son and a daughter by his first wife. They were both good children and loved each other with all their hearts. After some time had gone by, the man married again, and he chose a widow with one daughter who was ugly and wicked, and her mother was ugly and wicked too. From the very day the new wife came into the house, there was no peace for the man's children, not a corner to be found where they could get any rest. So the boy thought the best thing to do was to go out into the world and earn his own bread. When he had roamed about for some time, he came to the king's palace, where he obtained a place under the coachman. And very brisk and active he was, and the horses that he looked after were so fat and sleek that they shone again. But his sister, who was still at home, fared worse and worse. Both her stepmother and her stepsister were always finding fault with her, whatsoever she did and whithersoever she went. And they scolded her and abused her, so that she never had an hour's peace. They made her do all the hard work, and the hard words fell to her lot early and late, but little enough food accompanied them. Oh, nuts. One day they sent her to the brook to fetch some water home, and an ugly and a horrible head rose out of the water and said, "Wash me, girl." "Yes, I will wash you with pleasure," said the girl, and began to wash and scrub the ugly face. But she couldn't help thinking this was a very unpleasant piece of work. When she'd done it, and done it well, another head rose up out of the water, and this one was uglier still. "Brush me, girl," said the head. "Yes, I will brush you with pleasure," said the girl, and set to work with the tangled hair. And, as may be easily imagined, this was too by no means pleasant work. When she had got it done, another, much more ugly and horrible-looking head rose out of the water. "Kiss me, girl," said the head. "Yes, I will kiss you," said the man's daughter, and she did it, but she thought that it was the worst bit of work she'd ever done in her life. So the heads began to talk to each other and to ask what they should do for this girl who was so full of kindness. "She shall be the prettiest girl that ever was, and fair and bright as the day," said the first head. "Gold shall drop from her hair whenever she brushes it," said the second. "Gold shall drop from her mouth whenever she speaks," said the third head. So when the man's daughter went home, looking as beautiful and bright as day, the stepmother and her daughter grew much more ill-tempered, and it was worse when she began to talk, and saw that golden coins dropped from her mouth. The stepmother fell into such a towering passion that she drove the man's daughter in the pigsty, that she might stay there with her fine show of gold, the stepmother said, but she should not be permitted to set foot in the house. It was not long before the mother wanted her own daughter to go to the stream to fetch some water. When she got there with her pails, the first head rose up out of the water close to the bank. "Wash me, girl," it said. "Wash yourself," answered the woman's daughter. Then the second head appeared. "Brush me, girl," said the head. "Brush yourself," said the woman's daughter. So down it went to the bottom, and the third one came up. "Kiss me, girl," said the head. "As if I would kiss your ugly mouth," said the girl. So the heads talked together about what they do for this little girl, who was so ill-tempered, and full of her own importance. And they agreed that she should have a nose that was 4 ells long, and a jaw that was 3 ells, and a fur brush in the middle of her forehead, and every time she spoke ashes should fall from her mouth. When she came back to the cottage with her pails, she called out to her mother, who was inside. "Open the door! Open the door yourself, my dear child," said the mother. "I can't get near because of my nose," said the daughter. When the mother came and saw her, you can imagine what a state of mind she was in, and how she screamed and lamented, but neither nose nor the jaw grew any less for that. Now the brother, who was in service at the king's palace, had taken a portrait of his sister, and he carried the picture with him, and every morning he knelt down before and prayed for his sister, so dearly did he love her. And the other stable boys heard him doing this, and they saw it as they peeped through the keyhole into his room, and saw that he was kneeling down before a picture, and they told everyone that every morning and evening the youth knelt down and prayed to an idol which he had. And at last they went to the king himself, and begged that he too would peep through the keyhole, and see for himself what the youth did. At first the king would not believe this, but after a long, long time they prevailed with him, and he crept tiptoe to the door, peeped through, and saw the youth on his knees, with his hands clasped before a picture which was hanging on the wall. "Open the door," cried the king, but the youth did not hear. So the king called him again, but the youth was praying so fervently that he didn't hear him this either time. "Open the door, I say," said the king again. "It is I want to come in." And the youth sprang to the door and unlocked it, but in his haste he forgot to hide the picture. And when the king came in and saw it, he stood still as if he were in fetters, and could not stir from the spot, as the picture seemed to him so beautiful. "There is nothing on nowhere on earth, so beautiful a woman as this," said the king. But the youth told him that she was his sister, and that he had painted her, and that if she was not prettier than the picture, she was at all events not uglier. "Well, if she is as beautiful as all that, I will have her for my queen," said the king. And he commanded the youth to go home and fetch her without a moment's delay, and to lose no time in coming back. The youth promised to make all the haste he could, and set forth from the king's palace. When the brother arrived at home to fetch his sister, her stepmother and stepsister would go too, so they all set out together, and the man's daughter took with her a casket where she kept her gold, and a dog which was called Little Snow. These two things were all she inherited from her mother. When they travelled for some time, they had to cross the sea, and the brother sat down at the helm, and the mother and the two half-sisters went to the forepart of the vessel, and they sailed a long, long way. At last they were in sight of land. "Look at that white strand there, that is where we shall land," said the brother, pointing across the sea. "What is my brother saying?" inquired the man's daughter. "He says you are to throw your casket out into the sea," said the stepmother. "Well, if my brother says so, I must do it," said the man's daughter, and she flung her casket into the sea. When they sailed for some time longer, the brother once more pointed to the sea. "There you may see the palace where we are bound." "What is my brother saying?" said the man's daughter. "Now says you throw your dog into the sea," answered the stepmother. The man's daughter wept and was sorely troubled, for Little Snow was the dearest thing she had on earth, but at last she threw him overboard. This girl is not the brightest, is she? She's not exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer, Carl. And so they sailed a long way further. "Thou then must say, is the king coming to meet thee?" said the brother, pointing to the seashore. "What is my brother saying?" asked his sister again. "Now he says you're to make haste and throw yourself overboard," answered the stepmother. She wailed and wept, but as her brother had said that, she thought she must do it and let them see. As I said, not the brightest. But when she arrived at the palace, and the king beheld the ugly bride with a nose that was 4 ells long, and a jaw that was 3 ells, and a forehead that had a bush in the middle of it, he was quite terrified. But the wedding feast was all prepared, and he regarded brewing and baking. All the wedding guests were stating, so ugly as she was, the king was forced to take her. But he was wroth, and none can blame him for that. So he caused the brother to be thrown into a pit full of snakes. However, Carl, on the first Thursday night after this, a beautiful maiden came to the kitchen of the palace and begged the kitchen maid who slept there to lend her a brush. She begged very prettily and got it, and she brushed her hair, and the gold dropped from it. And the little dog was with her, and she said, "Go out, Little Snow, and see if it will soon be day." She said this thrice, and the third time she sent out the dog to see it, as it was very near dawn. Then she was forced to depart, but as she went she said, "Out on the ugly bushy bride, sleeping so soft by the young king's side. On sand and stones on my bed I make, and my brother sleeps with the cold snake, unpitied and unwept. I shall come twice more, and then never again." In the morning the kitchen maid related what she'd seen and heard, and the king said that next Thursday night he would himself watch in the kitchen to see if this were true. And when it had begun to grow dark, he went out into the kitchen to the girl. But though he rubbed his eyes and did everything he could to keep himself awake, it was all in vain, for the bushy bride crooned and sang until his eyes were fast closed, and the beautiful young maiden came he was sound asleep and snoring. This time also was as before. She brought a brush and brushed her hair with it, and gold dropped down as she did. And again she sent the dog out 3 times, but as she was going she said as said before, "I shall come once more, and then never again." On the 3rd Thursday night the king once more insisted on keeping watch, and he sent 2 men to hold him. Each of them was to take an arm and jerk him by the arm whenever he seemed to be going to sleep, and the 2 men to watch his bushy bride. But as the night wore on, the bushy bride again began to croon and sing, so his eyes began to close and his head to droop on one side. And then came the lovely maiden, and got the brush and brushed her hair till gold dropped from it. And then she sent a Little Snow to see if it would soon be day, and this she did 3 times. The 3rd time it was just beginning to go light, and then she said, "Out on the ugly bushy bride, sleeping so soft by the young king's side. On sand and stones I make my bed, and my brother sleeps with a cold snake. Unpitied and unwept. Now I shall never come again," she said, and then she turned to go. But the 2 men who were holding the king by the arms seized his hands and forced a knife into his grasp and made him cut her little finger just enough to make it bleed. Thus the true bride was freed, and the king then awoke, and she told him all that had taken place, and how the stepmother and stepsister had betrayed her. Then the brother was at once taken out of the snake pit. The snakes had never touched him, and the stepmother and stepsister were flung into it instead. No one can tell how delighted the king was to get rid of that hideous bushy bride, and get a queen who was bright and beautiful as the day itself. And now the real wedding was held, and held in such a way that it was heard of and spoken of about all over 7 kingdoms. The king and his bride drove to church, and Little Snow was in the carriage too. When the blessing was given, they went home again, and after that I saw no more of them. I often feel that some of the people in these stories could do better if they were just a little bit more sensible. Hey, Carl? Until tomorrow, love you to bits.